What if all the things that you've heard about millennials are not true? Today, we've got a mythbuster on the podcast. His name is Preston Hoopes. He is a millennial, but he is a successful leader in a multi-billion-dollar construction company. He's an operations manager for Swinnerton Construction, and he is definitely a construction lifer. In our conversation, we talk about how Preston got into the business, the early challenges that he found, how he combined a strong drive with a real sense of humility to overcome some of those young ego challenges that a lot of us have, and some of us being older still have. And we talk about how he has learned to manage in a multi-generational environment with both baby boomers and millennials, some of the things that millennials bring to the table that give them a real advantage in terms of collaboration and the embracing of technology. And at the end of the interview, Preston gives some key insights for young people in light of how they can develop their careers in the next 10 to 15 years. And I think you'll be surprised as to his perspective and some of the recommendations that he gives. So make sure that you stick around to the end of the interview to hear that. So thanks to Preston for coming on the show today. I hope you enjoyed this interview. Feel free to give Construction Genius a rating or a review wherever you get your podcasts. Contact me on my website if you have any questions or feedback, ericanderton.com, and also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm there all the time at Eric Anderton. You can just search for my name. I'm sure I'll come up. Thank you for listening to the show today, and enjoy my interview with Preston.
This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. All right, Preston, welcome to the show here today.
Thank you for having me, Eric.
You're in a generation that a lot of folks have complained to me about over the years, the millennials, and yet you find yourself in a leadership role in a construction company. Why do you think it is that there's such a reputation that millennials have in construction? Where do you think that comes from?
You know, construction is such a traditionalist industry. It was built on hard work, labor force, and I really think where the millennials come into play is that they were raised with technology. They're a little more efficient, know the technology better, and it comes across that they're lazy. And I don't necessarily think that's the case. They just have a different way, whether it's through technology or it's through the way the education system raised them, that it comes across as lazy, but I don't think that's correct. And it's going to take that gap, and as baby boomers age out and the millennials come in, which is a driving force in our industry because they're the largest, every 1 in 3 workers is millennial. And I think there's a little conflict between really the boomers and the millennials more so than Gen X and millennials.
What would you say are the 1 or 2 things that the millennials bring to the table in a positive way that are really impacting the construction industry?
They are very analytical thinkers. Very creative, and they are really, really good at collaboration. Everything, education, from education to, working in the office, everything is built around collaboration and teamwork and building up your team members. So it's not a very individualistic generation.
That's interesting. In terms of the collaboration, what are the main differences in the ways that millennials communicate when you compare it specifically to the boomers, the older folks, and maybe some of the older Gen Xers?
Yeah, we've had to bring on additional technology. We've had to create huddle rooms for, breakout meetings for them to collaborate and work together on assignments.
Right.
And I think the baby boomers, it was mostly individual. That's kind of how you're raised in education. I went through it because I'm a cusper between Gen X and millennials, and
right.
It wasn't until I went back and got my master's that I noticed how much the education system changed into teamwork based, instead of being individual assignments.
Interesting.
And so it's really interesting.
How did you get into construction?
I got into construction That's all I knew. So as growing up playing sports, and it was either go play professional sports or get into construction and follow my dad's footsteps. And it's something he followed in his parents' footsteps. And it's what I knew. It's what I loved. Driving down the road and seeing the towers, and my dad pointing these towers out in San Francisco and around the country that he built as a little kid. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And your dad, your dad's Jeff Hoopes. He was the CEO of Swinnerton up until the end of last year, right?
Yes. Yeah. He retired January 2nd, 2020.
So when you were young and at what point did you decide it's going to be construction, and what kind of sports were you playing? I'm just curious.
We all played, I have three brothers, in the middle of three. We all grew up playing basketball. That was the
Right.
love of the family, baseball and football, but basketball is a true love. And we were all, all county, all Bay Area. We earned a lot of honors, had multiple scholarship offers. We all had, physical flaws that put us back in education. And here we are in construction.
So that's interesting. So just to explore that a little bit in terms of how you built your career, when you first started off in construction, what was your biggest struggle when you first started to get into the business?
I think I had a little bit different of an intro into the business than most. I came to work for Swinnerton as an intern for 3 summers, then joined Swinnerton. And I came in with the last name that it didn't necessarily benefit me in the workplace.
Right.
And so if I could do that all again, I probably would have gone and worked somewhere else first.
Interesting.
And that would have been, get my ground, get rid of all the green on your back and figure out really where you're going and get stable. Then come work for a company that you love, and it's grown you and your entire family for your life.
So as you were starting off and you were kind of facing some of those last name struggles, so to speak, what did you do to overcome that? What did you focus on?
I focused on being polite, hard work, and being humble.
Huh.
And just showing up every day and do my job and support the others around me and not let the last name come up. I still catch myself to this day. I introduce myself as Preston.
Right.
I don't say the last name inside the company, and people will always ask your last name. Then it's, I want them to know me for who I am. It's not a last name thing. It's not a rite of passage to have my last name. It's really, I want to prove myself.
That's interesting. That idea of proving yourself. It seems one of the complaints that I've heard from the older generation about the younger generation is they come in many times that, let's say they've gone to Cal Poly or, they've gone to a construction program. They've got themselves a degree. They come in and they have this sense of entitlement. That's how it's perceived, at least.
Oh yeah.
How do you see that?
The kids coming out, I think it's no different than when I came out of school. You want to conquer the world.
Uh-huh.
You want to take it on, and you want to be trusted. And I constantly, with some of my younger engineers, it's having those conversations of the progression and the steps, and seeing the big picture of how you get there and how important your role is now, and how important it is to understand your role now to be able to move on to the next step and also manage other people. And they see it, and it's just creating the patience, because everything, the millennials are raised with technology. It's now. It's
right.
Video games. It's you're getting a response if you succeeded or not, or beat a level. Now it's not waiting 2 years, which seems like an eternity.
So what advice would you give to people who are struggling with their folks seemingly being impatient? What advice would you give to them in terms of positively leading them so that they are they're not getting discouraged when their expectations aren't being met?
Yeah, I think you need to challenge the younger generation. These kids are smart.
Yep.
It's amazing to see these kids come in. I mean, they're brilliant, and they need to be challenged. They need to have a certain level of responsibility that makes them feel important. They
Right.
don't want to feel that they're just doing shuffling paperwork, RFIs, submittals,
Mm-hmm.
which we've all done. I did it for 3.5 years, 6,000 RFIs on a big job. But they need to have a challenge to stay engaged and feel like they are part of the team.
Right.
And it's not the individual and how you're coming up. You got to be part of the team and helping the team succeed. And that's really what they want. So you need to show them the big picture and why you're here, why you're doing this, and the steps, and set out a a plan of progression for them, development check-ins, make that multiple times a year, or just don't do it once a year. Show them the steps and give them a lot of praise. They like praise.
So it sounds like the check-in part is more frequent than perhaps with older people.
Yeah, I think so. I think the feedback for all generations is really important, but the check-in, it's how they're doing. It's just checking in. It's getting to know them as a person.
Uh-huh.
If you treat and I think that goes for all generations or people in generations. I really think it comes down to getting to know those people on a personal level, and getting to know at what stage in their life they're at and what stage in their career they're at. And that really drives the values and what they want from a job and what they will do, for you if you give them that comfort.
Have you found any difference? I know some statistics will show that the millennials are getting married later, having kids later, that kind of stuff. I don't know if you've experienced that. And if so, have you seen any difference in the maturity rate of the millennials, or in any kind of their commitment to the company as a result of that? What has your experience been there?
That's interesting. Yeah, I think as you push, I think my parents had 3 boys before they were 30.
Right.
I didn't have my first kid until I was 30.
Right.
And, I got another one on the way, and the kids nowadays are not looking to have children until they're in their 30s. So there's a social immaturity and also a career immaturity that everything is about them. It's not about the family.
Right.
So when you had, when I was growing up, my dad took on jobs and moved 6 times before I was in 6th grade. Take on new opportunities to build a career for himself and to provide for his family. And if it was just him by himself, I don't think he would have done that. I think the family and the necessity to feed your family took over, and you did what you had to do to get the job done. So there is a difference. If you're not having kids until you're in your 30s, you're at a different place in life than the other generations were, or, millennials that are having young children young. And it really comes down to what your value system is and what you're looking for. If you have kids, you're looking for stability, right? If you have no kids and you're just worried about yourself, it's more selfish in that fact. If you have a wife and you're looking in the future, you're starting to make that transition into stability and looking down the road and creating a future and progression.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you find that marriage and kids benefits people as they lead in an organization? Does that have any impact, or is it not really impactful?
I think it's a huge impact. There's nothing more humiliating than going home and having your, kids jump all over you and beat you up after a long day of thinking you're the boss, right?
Yeah, right.
That's the reality. Come home and daughter meets you at the door or whatnot, and you're dad again. So you're playing these multiple roles, and it's really humbling to have children and to see them grow. And for me, it made me a better person.
Yeah.
Be softer, soft skills, develop those, and be a little more emotionally intelligent.
It's interesting. So you have a girl?
Yeah, I have a 3-year-old daughter.
No, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, girls are awesome. I have 4 boys and 1 girl, and I'm so happy that I have 1 girl. She really is she's a blessing. I'm just curious, as you began to grow in your career, what were some of the rookie mistakes that you made that, if you were, sitting in the situation you're in now, talking to yourself 10, 15 years ago, what were some of those rookie mistakes that you made? That's
a great question. I think back to there's one rookie mistake I made, and I did something great for the company, which I know is great. We saved a ton of money. It was in the recession, and I was working in San Francisco on a big high rise, and I cut a deal with our reproduction company because our rates were, everyone's looking for business. Everyone's trying to stay in business, and our rates were carried over from when it was booming. And so they came in, they said, what can we do to get your business? I said, here, cut this down. I saved the company. Looking back, I saved the company about $1 million in reproduction costs.
What do you mean by reproduction, by the way, just so?
Blueprints, plans, getting stuff printed.
Yeah. Right. Yep.
And the one thing I didn't do is clear it with the chief estimator at the time. And I walked into his office and I said, hey, I need you to sign this. And he looks at me and goes, sign what? And I should have communicated that better and brought him into the fold instead of trying to prove myself
Right.
more so. And that's something I look back on and still laugh at. His name is Dan Byer, a great guy, and his son still works for us. And he read me the riot act, and I deserved it. I totally deserved it. And, it's really bring the people in the fold, hold on to mentors,
Yeah.
and get the mentors of different generations that are older with the experience. I mean, this younger generation is very capable, but we don't have the experience. So you got to have those partners.
Who did you identify? You don't necessarily need to share their names, but what were you looking for in a mentor that made you want to, build a relationship with them? What was it that sort of attracted you to the folks who've had the biggest impact in your career?
I think it's mainly people that care for you and want to see you advance. I have 3 or 4 mentors that I could talk to about different situations, whether it be operations, whether it be sales, life, fathering,
Right.
a father. So that's, looking to those people for different aspects and getting kind of across ideas from each is really what I found important. It's really find someone that you click with, find someone that doesn't mind you calling them, sincerely want to help you.
That's neat. As you grew in your career, when did you first step into sort of a leadership role, not just, on a project, but perhaps with people reporting to you and things like that?
Yeah. It was, a few years back. I started, on the project teams going down that road, and I found success. I went back to school for my master's, got a master MBA with focus in building strategic teams and finance, so strategic leadership.
So let me just ask you that real quick. Why did you, what made you want to go back and get the MBA?
In all honesty, I wanted to better myself.
Uh-huh.
It's something my father did, and he always talked how it changed his life.
Yeah.
And he said, always go back and get your MBA after you work for a while.
Yeah.
You understand how to apply it. Don't do it right out of school because you don't know what you need to know. And I remember I was teaching study classes with the kids coming right out of college into their master's programs because they were trying to apply it to being a soccer coach in high school for little kids and whatnot. I didn't know how to apply it financially to business or
Right.
That environment.
What was it that you, at what point in your career did you decide to go back to get the MBA? How long were you in the business for?
I worked for just about 7 years. So I went back, I was 28 years old.
And were you able, so when you're in class there, were you making connections in your mind to what you were learning in theory to what you were facing in the business?
Oh, totally. Yeah, we went back. We did a lot of reflection papers. We did, being in the leadership focused courses, we did a lot of self-reflection.
Right.
And it was personalysis, it was 360s, and how you apply that to situations. So we had to go back and write 15, 20-page papers on reflective scenarios and how we would have done it differently, knowing the tools we have now. So it really made you think. Yeah, it was really wild. And that was probably the catapult to my career.
Interesting.
And being able to see the big picture of things.
What was the main thing for you that changed then between your pre-MBA and your post-MBA in terms of how you showed up in the workplace?
It taught me how to be professional.
Huh.
And it taught me I belonged, and how to speak the lingo, how to strategize, how to apply logic to data analytics and everything else.
Right.
And that was really important. How do you can go with a gut feel, or you can apply logic and take riskier, take additional risks. But it was a drive that made me want to succeed more. And it taking the whole holistic view of the business world and where you fit in was eye-opening. That was really important.
It's interesting. I know one of the challenges a lot of construction pros have is let's say they've been in the field for a long time. They really know the business, and they see things that need to change in their company. And then they go into the sort of the executive suite to communicate some of that. And sometimes they have a real challenge in that communication because they're not necessarily coming with that executive perspective that helps them to see a bigger picture. You know what I'm talking about there?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is a challenge. The best thing it ever taught me is how you put together a business plan,
Mm-hmm.
how you put together different steps to a business plan and analyze different areas and break those out so you can explain that to someone above you and the challenges and weigh the odds, really be able to explain yourself.
That's interesting because I think that is the main issue that a lot of folks have is that what they see is correct, but they don't know how to frame it in such a way that what they see is received well by other people sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. So as you grew in your career and you got into this idea of maybe the shift from building projects to more working with people, what was the biggest challenge that you found there from being sort of more project focused to being more people focused?
People are your biggest risk and they're your biggest asset. It really comes down to, on a project, you have a lot of roles and responsibilities. You're part of a team. You have to hit milestones. There's a lot of stress around that. And when you have to remove yourself from that, you can't necessarily control the outcome. And being someone who's somewhat controlling, self-identified on that, you have to remove yourself. You have to trust your partners. You have to really get to know the people and what makes them click and make sure that they're telling you the truth. And that's it. It takes time to learn that. It's not something you just walk into and all of a sudden get it.
Yeah.
And it's building people up. It's creating opportunity for them and getting them to follow your lead, which takes time as well, and trust you.
So how do you do that when you're in an environment where you're in the leadership role and you have multi-generations that are involved in a project? So you may have some old school, superintendent or foreman who's been in the trades 30, 40 years and they really know what's up. You got your few Gen Xers, maybe some millennials. How do you handle that sort of stew pot of generations?
I think the key is you bring everyone in, and one of my first projects after I came down to the Silicon Valley to run the operations, we had a big team. We had a scaling amount of work with a client on a campus, corporate tech campus. And I started out with 5 people down here. I had
Right.
4 admin, 1 superintendent. And we started hiring. I hired another 3 superintendents to put on that job, another, more admin. And what we did is we had this team that was we had high performing individuals, but we didn't have a high performing team. And to build that teamwork, we had weekly meetings. It probably lasted about 3 hours, but half that meeting was just building relationships. We'd eat food together, we'd talk, we'd get to know each other, what makes them tick. But the information I got out of just having a casual conversation with the team and not having a direct agenda related to that meeting was priceless, because they were comfortable telling me what was going on.
Right.
They're comfortable asking for advice. And it wasn't easy. It took probably 6 months to be able to break down all the barriers to where it was a trust, and it was, you're my partners in this, and it's not, you're not working for me. We're doing this together. And that was really the key to breaking it down with that team.
That's interesting. So it's interesting because you say that about the high performing individuals versus a high performing team. So in your opinion, what is the key difference when you look at a high performing team versus just a group of individuals? What's the key difference between those two entities?
They work in symbiosis. It's when you get a team that's high functioning, it's almost music. It's beautiful to watch. It really is. And that's what gets me excited, to see this team come together, go through all the stages of team building. And they're in sync, knowing what each other needs without even having to ask it. Priceless. It's pretty neat. And as you add additional team members, you disrupt that. And so we were able to kind of stabilize that team. And we had multiple different generations, but everyone treated each other with respect. And when you have diversification, that helps build a better high-performing team. And so having the different generations, the different skill sets, was really beneficial to the whole team.
Well, I'm just interested because, as you described building the team, you talked about, these long agendaless meetings. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I can hear, guys and gals that I know in construction in the back of my head saying, man, I am too busy to have long agendaless meetings. How did you manage that? I mean, what did you do to Because I mean, I imagine you got your super in there looking at you saying, Preston, why am I here? I got stuff to do. How did you manage that process?
It's I had an agenda in my head. I
Right.
knew I
Okay.
had to get out of the meetings, but it wasn't something I wanted to make rigid on the team.
Uh-huh.
It's changed now that we're comfortable and we can get through it. But the less rigidity that you have in those meetings, the more people get to know you for a person, and
Right.
you build a trusting environment. When you have a trusting environment, the people will open up and they're going to ask for advice. They're going to try and support each other differently. Things come out that would not typically come out in a timed, structured meeting.
Interesting.
It's really different kind of thinking, and it's something I went in the first time we had a structured meeting. I got nothing out of it. So I went in the next time and we just sat there and really had a conversation, checked in on every job. We hit the highlights. Is the client happy? Financially, are we okay? How does all that work? And every question I wanted and more were answered in those meetings. And, I think at the height, we had 9 projects going at once on that campus. So we had a lot to cover.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. As you reflect on your leadership at the moment, what are some of the biggest challenges that you have developing leaders in your organization?
I think it's kind of market driven right now. We have a lot of talent, and it's hard to find additional talent. It's hard to identify those leaders. We're trying as a company right now for succession planning to bring up the younger generations to fill that gap.
Right.
We have a big gap. Every company has a big gap.
Mm-hmm.
Next 5 years, we have a lot of turnover coming at the higher ranks, and we're developing those younger folks, whether it's Gen X, Millennial, to come up. And, necessarily on my team, it's given the younger folks an opportunity to take part in the interactions with the client. It's financial accounting. It's teaching them, pairing them with mentors of older generations to bring them up and teach them their experience before they have to learn it the hard way on their own.
So that's interesting, because I know what I'm seeing in the industry is that that gap exists. The turnover is happening where there's this generation that's leaving, and the generation that's going to be taking their place are a little less experienced than perhaps they might be. So
Right.
How do you kind of accelerate that experience cycle so that they're ready to step into that role?
Yeah, I mean, I for my personal, so I came down here. I was 31 when I started in this role.
That's cool.
I turned 34 this month.
That's
And
awesome.
my partner, he's been in the industry. He's my project director. He's kind of my ops guy right now. We operate together on things. He's been in the business 37 years.
Yeah.
That is experience and knowledge that I could never replace.
Right.
I'm learning a lot from him, but I use him as my sounding board. We work really well together because he's pretty calm and he's been through it all. And I get excited, right? I'm still a young guy. I get excited. I get fired up, and we sit down, he talks me through it. We work together, and it's having those partners and those mentors that are with you to help you build yourself as well as the team. You're not going to throw a bunch of young kids in here and hope they succeed. You got to have the experience. Without the experience, there's a lot of hard lessons learned.
So how do you handle your own ego in terms of checking yourself? You know what I mean? Like, I know when I was younger, I still got a big ego now and I'm 50, but you know what I'm saying? When I was younger, it's like, who are you to tell me I'm smart? I know what's up. How do you have any like techniques or sort of things that you tell yourself in terms of checking your own ego when things get heated?
I think as a younger guy, that's one of those things I asked me a question earlier about things I reflect on early in my career. And I had a big ego. And as I got older, circumstances in life and whatnot, the ego, all this can be gone tomorrow. Everything I've been building, all the work I have could be gone tomorrow. I've seen it happen before. I've seen, all the guys I graduated with get laid off. I've seen half of Swinerton get laid off in the Great Recession. And you just got to be humble for what you have, because I have my wife, my daughter, and another kid on the way, that if I'm cocky about this, I could lose everything and hurt my family. So it comes down to on the rock. I don't have a second income. It's based on me. I got to take care of what I have. There's no egos because we're doing this as a team.
Right on.
That's kind of where my drive comes from.
Where do you see the construction industry going in the next 5 to 10 years as you mature in your career, as you get into your 40s and 50s? Where do you think the business is going?
It is hard to say. We have so much money going into technology right now for the construction industry. We're seeing some really great products come out, technology come out that's changing the way we're doing business. We have a whole tech group that's getting into this, investing in companies, whatnot, and helping them get in. We see prefabrication as a key component, whether that be a full apartment unit prefabrication or whether it's just prefabricating soffits, for our drywall team and doing that in a shop and bringing them out to the job site, and install them in a quarter of the time it would take on the site. We got to find the efficiencies because the labor's not there and the labor's aging out. So we have to embrace it. We're looking heavily into CLT, cross-laminated timber, which is a renewable resource.
Yep.
It's only helping our forest. It's not hurting our forest. It's creating additional industry in those markets that the lumber companies failed in or were pushed out due to regulations. My family comes from, both my parents were born in Humboldt County.
Humboldt? Hey, I went to Humboldt.
Yeah.
That's where I went to college.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's beautiful up there, all the redwoods. And we have this family ranch that is surrounded by, it used to be Pacific Lumber Company. Now
Where's it at? Where's the ranch at?
It's up above Scotia.
Oh, yeah, nice. Yeah. Yeah, I know where Scotia's at.
Yep. And so we grew up in the lumber company, and my mom's dad was a sheriff there. And
no way.
Oh yeah. And so to see that industry just fall apart up there really hurt the community, and it's really neat to see those start coming back with these wood products and being able to build high rises out of wood products. And
right.
Seeing these forests thrive again. So it's really neat to see that. And I think the renewable resources and the prefabrication, get into that is really where the business is going. It's really, how do we find the efficiencies? How do we help the earth? How do we provide for the future generations?
As you reflect on your career, and as we sort of come to the end of the interview here, if I'm a young person in construction, let's say I'm just out of college, I got my degree. Obviously I probably got a job unless something's seriously wrong with me. What are 2 or 3 words of advice would you give to like a high energy, ambitious project engineer who just wants to, take on the world in the next 10, 15 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. Find a mentor, find someone that you trust. Put your head down and work hard. You got to put in the time. You're not going to just advance because you're eager. You're not going to advance because you're smarter than the next guy. There's going to be a multiple year window where you're going to be tested.
Right.
And make sure you look for feedback, make sure you have a good sounding board and mentors that will give you, honest and truthful feedback to help you develop. And you got to have some patience.
What's your view on, let's say I come in as a project engineer and I'm working in the field a lot. What's your view on trying out different parts of the business, maybe getting into some estimating to develop some chops over there, as well as working with projects? What's your thought there?
Yeah, we do a rotation system. It's not always done correct, but we try to do our best, where you get exposed to the estimating, you get exposed to the financial side, you get exposed to the pursuits, how you're putting proposals together and the sell of it all.
Right.
So we try to expose our young folks to all that and see, you can kind of tell who's comfortable with what and where they might have interest. And it's really good to see that because, we have so many engineers, but you don't have enough folks that are business-oriented salespeople. And you need the client satisfaction.
Right.
I mean, you really need that. And so that's really important. And that's something we teach them all, is you're a service provider to that client.
Right.
Do what you need to do. You take care of yourself, but you protect yourself as well, but you take care of that client.
Okay, so let me just end up with that perspective of being a service provider and sort of having a sales mentality. What are a couple of different mindsets or actions that someone could adopt to be more sales oriented as a construction professional?
Yeah. What I tell my folks is, you're selling every day.
Right on.
You're the front line with the client. You're in meetings with the client every day. You're selling every interaction you have with that client.
Right on.
And some of our folks that are better salespeople than others, the clients request them back. They want to work with them. They're presenting, whether it's presenting a change order or it's presenting newfound information, you're selling.
Yep.
So you really got to, I try to work with them, talk through it with them, and go through
That's
that.
awesome. That's great. That's great. Okay. So as we wrap up here, Preston, I like to ask all of my guests this question. What is your favorite restaurant, favorite place to eat?
Favorite place to eat? Oh man. There's a food place in Santa Fe. You got me stumped right now. Soul food.
Soul food?
Oh, soul food. It's awesome.
Is that what it's called? The place is called Soul Food?
It's called soul food. You get chicken, red beans, and rice, and this piqué sauce. Oh,
Right on.
man, you can't beat it.
So that's Soul Food in San Rafael.
That's soul food in Santa Fe.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Preston, I really appreciate you taking the time today and giving us these insights, and really do wish you the best as your career continues to grow.
Thank you, Eric. Really appreciate you having me.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and always remember that the show is brought to you by Kick-Ass Meetings. I've been working with construction leaders since 2004, teaching them how to run extremely effective problem-solving meetings that gets their people collaborating, taps into their creativity. And to get yourself a free copy of the Kick-Ass Meeting Report, go to www.ericanderton.com/kickassmeetings. Grab yourself that free report, read it, use it in your business. You'll find it extremely useful. And thanks again for listening.